You see, the process of communication is not that simple. Sometimes it gets quite complicated, complex, and imperfect. There might be malfunction, and so it proves ineffective with regards to communication problems. So there will be a miscommunication. The essence of this video is to get you to be effective in your communication. Communication is not complete until the sender gets a feedback from the receiver. I want you to get this. It is even more important. There are some dimensions, or if you like, categories of communication. First, intrapersonal communication. Communication with yourself. It has to do with your thoughts, thinking, passing judgment on yourself, rehearsing certain messages. A communication that happens with you, it's intrapersonal communication. The second type of or category of communication has to do with interpersonal communication. The communication you have with the next person, a group of people, as in communication between people. It involves a minimum of two. That's communication. Interpersonal communication. Other signals simultaneously. A communication between two people. Now we have the communication that is with a group. People communicating to group communication. So we're looking at quite a number of persons involved. There are other larger groups, could be work, worship, and also social media, group communication. And we also have public mass communication. This has to do with even more larger members of people. Now, basically, we are using a social media platform to engage in this communication. Could be the television, the radio, the newspaper, magazines, books, films, etc. These are all forms of communication, public communication, also known as mass communication. So these are the four categories of communication I want you to take notice of. The communication process. There's a process for communication. So the people, interested persons, or the things that matters in the communication process. We have the sender, the one who is constructing the message, the writer, the speaker, or the encoder. Then we have the message, then we have the medium, channel, how the message will be communicated, which medium, which channel, which means of transport will the message be delivered. Mostly it could be by speech, letter, chat, radio, TV. Well, the list is endless. Then we have the receiver, the one receiving the message that has been communicated by the sender. The receiver is also the listener, the one who decode, make meaning of what the sender intends to communicate or has communicated. The receiver also the reader. So basically, there is the sender who sends the message, and the message gets to the receiver. Now, when the message gets to the receiver, the sender, as a result of, or as it were, as effective communication would have it, the sender needs to get a feedback from the receiver. Now, I'm saying that it doesn't necessarily have to be in agreement, but there should be that communication, there should be that mutuality, that I sent you a message and I got a feedback. We are saying that you have communicated effectively. This model captures all the essential elements of communication. Obviously, if one of these elements is missing, no communication can take place. If there's no sender, there's no effective communication. If there's no message, there's no effective communication. Neither if we do not have a receiver. So this is three that constitute effective communication. Now, understand the elements of communication. The sender, I want us to look at it even more. So the sender is the source of the message, is the source and the initiator of the communication process. So he encodes. Now, coding could be verbal and non-verbal actions and inaction symbols, anything to communicate his intended message or the message he has communicated is the role of the sender. Take note that the sender also puts together the message, which is the second element of communication, the message. Now, the message could be verbal or non-verbal signals that express the sender's wishes conveyed to the receiver, the message. So mostly the message may be in a form that's one or more receivers that involve the receiver's sensory organ to help in the understanding process. So speech may be heard, words written could be read, and gestures could be made meaning of. All the things I've said constitute a form of message. Let us look at the components of a message. What constitutes the message? The actual content is one. Now, secondly, how it's been communicated, the tone of voice, how it's been communicated, and third, the non-verbal communication. So your facial expression, your body movement, your gestures, appearance, dressing, something that it's a form of communication but you have not verbally said, but people could read meaning. It is a form of non-verbal communication. So you could use word, statement, or questions and express many different messages by simply changing tone of the voice, bodily movement, or facial expressions. So notice that your words would come with a tone of voice and some form of movement, So to the extent that an effective communication has been achieved, these three components will come together, then the sender's intended purpose will be achieved. Some research work have shown that effective or successful communication consists of 7% content. Effective communication that has occurred has to do with 7% of the content and about 38% of the tone, how it was communicated, the voice behind the communication, and 55% of non-verbal communication at all. So non-verbal communication is important, is relevant, it cannot be sidelined. Take notice of it. So we want to listen to what people have said, but we also want to take note of the things that they have not said but have communicated via their non-verbal gestures. The third element of communication, channel, the channel by which the message will be transported. So it could be vocal, that's vocal oral channel, and it could be just because you are in a face-to-face interaction with the person, you communicate with your body odor. It's a form of communication, or a touch. You touched and you communicated, a sense of touch. You have communicated. All right, so now the receiver hears the message, perceives the message, decodes it, listens to it, and make meaning out of it. Now the intention is to give feedback to the sender. Now, because we are not very sure as to what will be the receiver's response, it could be a bit complex. Now, the complexity might be as a result of culture, past experiences, religious beliefs, and spiritual maturity. Age could be a factor, educational status, emotional conditions, financial status, expectation, personal interpretations of the symbols and gestures, actions used will influence the receiver's response. Take note, effective, successful communication occurs when the receiver decoding, understanding messages matches with the sender's intended message. Then we have reached an effective communication. If the receiver incorrectly perceives, decodes your message, you have not communicated right, and we are saying that you have not communicated effectively. You will listen. Listening. There are many types of listening, but what kind of listener are you? I want this to interest you, so that you can identify the kind of listener that you are. Some people listen for facts, for information and details for their own use. Some people may listen because they care. They want to be there for you. They are interested in your well-being. So there's that kind of intimacy. Now, some people also listen, but why do you listen? Well, what are your motives? Well, your ability to listen and care for others is an act of God, and it's an act of grace. To listen and show careness, you are able to reflect love. This is the type of listener that you want to be. A listener that listen because you care, and also you are interested. Now the feedback. The success or failure of your communication is measured by the feedback you get as the sender. Until a communication is complete, there must be a feedback. It could be an approval, an understanding, sympathy, agreement, disagreement, but there should be a feedback. The feedback could be verbal and non-verbal as well. There should be that kind of feedback. Then there's an element of noise, basically things that interfere with effective communication. That serves as a stumbling block and an obstacle towards communication process. Noise. I want you to take note of these types of noise and the ones that you think you can address, and that's the ones that are out of your control. Now we have the physical noise. So physical noise has to do with interferences the speaker may experience. Mostly that is external of the speaker. So it could be the things that constitute our environment. All the things that constitute our environment could be a setback to effective communication. That serves in the characteristics of a physical noise. Let's look at the type of noise, the other type of noise. So the other type of noise I'm sharing with you, physical barriers within the speaker or listener. So, take note of visual impairment, hearing loss, articulation disorders, stage fright might constitute the physiology with regards to noise. Take note and be expectant of this. Now the type of noise is psychological. It has to do with the mind, mental interferences. Now you will have stereotypes, prejudice in the senders and receivers. Biases these parties show constitute noise. Inaccurate expectation, extreme emotionalism, anger, hatred, grief, loss, love, immaturity in speaking or reasoning constitute your psychological noise. Now we have the noise that takes the form of semantics, that has to do with language, how languages communicated, the tongue used could serve as a noise. So you would have jargons that doesn't communicate to the other person's understanding. Semantics has it that once you are using these words, you have not communicated effectively to the extent that the receiver is unable to decode. Now notice that to the extent that you are able to communicate effectively, you would want to understand human nature and on the ability to get desirable responses. Understand people. Effective communication does not come naturally. You work at it. It's a skill. It's an act that you need to get better at. Aim at communicating to solve problems and reduce the things that get in your way, or avoid ineffective communication. The things that constitute ineffective communication, as I have argued above, avoid them. Now, you would also want to take note of the differences with regards to our mental faculty that exist amongst us. There are differences that you need to take into consideration. So keep an open mind for getting as many accurate facts as possible about reality. Admit that there is always more that can be said and learned, and how for the influence of attitudes, opinions, and emotions. Try to understand people. Do not be quick in your judgment. Then you can make progress with regards to your communication patterns. Take note, the subject of this presentation was effective communication. It was to bring to your attention that it is one of your important or most important skill or competence that you need to improve to get along life even more successfully. Let me hear from you what your thoughts are. I love you more. Regards.